Hi guys, after you do an intake, your third appointment with the client is going to involve three things. The first thing that you want to do, of course, is just make some small talk and see how they're doing, and maybe go back to what you prayed for them last week and ask how that's going. And then you want to tell them, today we're going to do three things. The first thing is we're going to review chapter 1 in the Break Every Stinking Chain book. Then we're going to talk about a customized plan for your healing, and I want us to work together on that. And lastly, I'm going to train you on how to do stage 1 of the process. So we're going to start with chapter 1 summary. Now, if your client has already been to a phase 1 group, then of course you'd skip this part. You don't have to go back and review phase 1 if they've already been through the entire phase 1. But if they have not, then go to the chapter summary and go back and forth. They could read the odd numbers, you can read the even numbers, and then you could discuss each point. The main thing I want to tell you to do with this first chapter is to give them the bicycle analogy about falling off the bike and breaking their arm, and how the brain responds the same way when we're hurt physically or emotionally. It really can't even differentiate the difference. It just says the same thing: do something, do something. And of course, when we fall off a bike and break our arm and our bone's sticking out, we know exactly what to do. We go to the emergency room in the hospital, and they will, reset that bone. That's going to be extremely painful. They're going to put a cast on it. That's going to be painful. You'll wear that thing for 5 or 6 weeks. And all of this is painful. In fact, when you get the cast off, you may go to rehab and have to do all kind of exercises that are very painful. But in the end, your arm will heal up as if it were never broken. And this point in chapter 1 prepares us that this process could be a little painful along the way, but it's worth it, because when we get to the end of the process, we're going to be completely free. Also, I like to share with them while we're reviewing chapter 1 that yes, the process is hard, but it's also hard to hold on to your pain, to keep it suppressed, to go through your life never resolving your trauma, because then your trauma is going to pop up like a beach ball underwater. From time to time, you're going to be triggered, and there's going to be an exaggerated response that comes out because of the unresolved trauma that is suppressed. Also, if you hold on to trauma for long enough, it's going to eventually begin showing up in your physical body. In fact, it's scientifically proven that many illnesses, chronic pain, even terminal illness can be rooted in childhood trauma. So really, you can share with your client to choose your heart. You can carry it with you, and it will impact you the rest of your life, or you can go through 4 or 5 weeks of dealing with it, one step at a time, and then releasing it and not carrying it anymore. So I like to share all of that, especially when we get to the part about the ACE score can take 20 years off your life. What the heck? Well, that's because trauma can show up in your physical body. Also, another reason why it can take 20 years off your life is because of the survivor behavior that you choose as a result of your trauma. If people get addicted to anything, it can shorten their life. So that's what that's talking about. I also like to tell people that I'm going to email them an ACE assessment along with a simple trauma assessment. The ACE assesses childhood trauma. The trauma assessment, it assesses, teenage, young adult years. So I like to go ahead and email them that, but I tell them there's no hurry. They don't have to do that right away. Just email it back to you as soon as they get it done. Whereas homework, we have to do within 48 hours of our session. So moving on to training them, doing a customized plan for them, I have an example here of a person who had 7 sources of trauma. And the first thing I do is make a list of all of the names that I have put stars by on the intake. Pull them out of the intake, list them on a piece of paper. And the first thing I do is ask myself, is there anyone on this list that we could never process and they would still get a lot of freedom and healing from processing the others? If the answer is yes, then I will cross that person off or put them at the very end of the list. Especially if people have many sources. And it's going to be hard to keep people over a year processing, but if you think they will, then that's okay. Put it at the end of the list. I kind of work backwards. So I'll say, who do they really not need to process? And who can we put last if they never make it around the bell curve? Then I'll think, who is probably I don't want to say biggest source of trauma, because trauma is relative and all the sources are big. Can't compare them like that, but compare them by the position that the person has in their life. If they're a parent or a sibling or an ex-husband, that's heavier, that's weightier. So it's going to go more toward the top of your bell curve. If they are still struggling with something today because of a trauma, you're going to want to do that toward the beginning. So let me just show you an example. Here is a bell curve of a woman who had 7 sources of trauma. And we want to process something that doesn't have many stories first. The car accidents are still affecting her today because she is having panic attacks and she still has a hard time getting in the car. So we want to make sure that we process a car accident. And it probably only has, 1 story of the accident and 2 or 3 stories after the accident. And so I would suggest starting with the source that has the least amount of of stories. And then church hurt. These are 2 pastors who are still affecting her today and her view of God. So I want to make sure I get these 2 done because they're still affecting her today. And then we can move into her top 3 sources of trauma, which are her mother, her father, and her aunt. And so I would put those in the order that I believe she needs to do them according to the position in their life and the amount of trauma that they've caused and the amount of stories that they're going to be writing. And then I come around this side, and she really needs to process this aunt and the bullying. But if she never makes it that far, we're going to get a lot accomplished just through these 5. So that's kind of how I think. I start with the end, I go to the top, and then I try to figure out what's really still affecting her a lot today. Then, after you go through a customized plan, you're going to want to train them on how to do stage 1. And that's simply talking about the 4 parts of stage 1, the time frame, the location, the facts in past tense using the word you for the perpetrator, and their feelings at the time. And then I like to warn them that when they begin to write their very first story, their brain might react in one of 2 extreme ways. Go ahead and prepare them for this so they'll know what to do if it happens. So one extreme way is they have trained their brain not to think about the trauma. It is suppressed so deep, they probably think it's not bothering them anymore. But when they begin to write, their brain might say, might fight against them. Why are you writing about this? You're over it. You've already dealt with this. That's really not that big a deal. Why do you think that's a trauma? And you want to make sure that you prepare them for your brain to fight against it. Because if your brain does that, they need to know that if they remember it and it hurt them back then they need to write it. You remember it, write it, because our brain only retains things that are traumatic or things that are amazing. So if they remember it, they need to write about it, even if they think they're over it, because it hurt them then. And then the other extreme way is your brain might say, oh, you want memory? I'll give you memory. And it might flood the brain with lots of memory. If that happens, tell them to have a piece of paper to jot down phrases to remember those memories so we can come back to them later. But to stick with the source of trauma and write as many stories as they can in that structured way. And if we don't get through all their stories the first week, we can save them to the next week, but they just need to write at least one more within 48 hours of their session so that their brain will be stimulated when they come to the session. So hopefully this has helped a little bit. Always feel free to text me if you have any questions about any of these training videos. See you next time.